would like to have notice if a landowner is bringing such a petition to the town. In order to accommodate that request, we changed the language here, which said the petition is filed with the town clerk with a copy to the village clerk. So it just says that if someone goes to the town with a petition, they should also file a copy with the village clerk. We then added language at the end of that section 7.2 that says the town shall inform all petitioners of the requirement that notice be given to the village clerk and may not vote on such attachment petition if the notice has not been given or waived by the village. It just says that, okay, if somebody is interested in doing this sometime in the future, the town would have to tell them you have to give notice to the village. The last sentence says that the village may, but is not required, to pass resolutions either supporting or opposing the petitions, and such resolutions shall not be determined to violate the 1997 Settlement and Cooperation Agreement. This is an important provision because in the 1997 agreement, we indicated that we would not encourage people to move from the town to the village, and we haven't. And in fact, when folks do raise that issue, they're routinely told, no, that can't be done pursuant to the 1997 agreement, and you have to talk to the town of Bristol with respect to your issues. And so that's the only change in section 7. If we move to section 8 involving development controls, this is a section where there are certain ordinances that deal with systems and other sewer issues. And the agreement, as stated, required the town to adopt certain ordinances that were consistent with what was agreed to here. We did learn after the meeting was, at our work meeting on the 14th, board members asked, well, has the town adopted those ordinances? We learned after the meeting that in fact the town intends to adopt those ordinances, but hasn't yet adopted the ordinances. They've hired a consultant to draft the ordinances, but they haven't yet been adopted by the town. So that's an issue that is, I think, not insignificant with respect to section 8. Section 9 also deals with a similar issue, sanitary, sewer, and water service. And in that section, the changes, again, talk about the town needing to amend its ordinances. The prior versions passed by the town in this agreement said that the town shall promptly pass these ordinances. The change we made here is to give the town a deadline and say the town will, by June 1, 2008, amend its ordinances. In this case, there are two state regulatory chapters, NR 151 and NR 216, that those ordinances need to comply with, and those involve erosion control and other issues on construction sites. And those are issues that the planning department and the village particularly, and if the board members have questions, Gene may be able to offer some insight on that, had specific concern about, because, and this was highlighted, I think, at the open working meeting, and again thereafter, is that we can't just pass an ordinance that's going to sit on a shelf and no one read, but we have to develop a rubric here where the folks at the counter in the village and the town are working collaboratively so that what gets done at one place is consistent with what gets done at the other place, and that citizens aren't getting mixed messages. There was some concern that presently the town and the village are not entirely on the same track with respect to that, and certainly this ordinance wasn't, as written, didn't further that process. It didn't necessarily hurt it, but there wasn't any real staff input into the provisions of this ordinance, and one thought was made at a public meeting that the village staff and the town staff ought to sit down and figure out what the correct process ought to be, and then it ought to be included particularly in section 9. We did make a change to the proposed section 9 that was passed by the town of Bristol in subsection B3, where it had previously said the town engineer will review the plans submitted by the applicant for compliance. We also required that the town forward copies of those documents to the village and obtain input from the village regarding the submitted documents. Subsection 4, we also required some consultation with the village by the town. Under section 13, dealing with housing needs, there was a question raised about the second paragraph that dealt with various districts in the land use plan of the town. And in fact, The agreement that is passed out to you, of course, doesn't have any of the attachments on, and you'll see that the attachments to that are voluminous, about 1.5 inches thick. And those attachments include the 97 agreement and lots of other agreements, but they also include, for example, the land use plan for the town of Bristol. And the attachment in the latest version we have is not the latest version of is incomplete, is not the latest version of the land use plans for the town of Bristol. That's an issue that, again, another issue that kind of needs to work out. But the town of Bristol council did indicate that he wasn't speaking definitively for the town, but giving his educated opinion that the town would just assume they didn't need that second paragraph in section 13. So that was taken out of this agreement, which is not to say anything about the substance of what's in that second paragraph, but just that it wasn't necessarily required in this particular document. As I page through this agreement, that is substantially the proposed changes in the agreement. There were a couple of other issues that were discussed at the working meeting that did not result in changes to the agreement. One had to do with if the town of Bristol would incorporate a portion of its property into a village, what is the impact of that on the agreement? And in fact, the agreement, the 1997 agreement gives Bristol certainly the right to incorporate it. In this agreement, it says that under the successors and assigned section, both the town and the village of Bristol, if one were to occur in the future, would be bound by any cooperative agreement. We didn't believe that a further change was needed to this. So with that, I will take any questions or other comments you might have about any of the versions.
You just mentioned, I think you just answered my question, but let me be sure. The 1997 agreement does not stop Bristol from incorporating. Now that we're involved in a new agreement here, or hope to get into a new agreement, does the failure of this coming to agree upon this have any effect on their incorporation effort? Now that we're entering into another agreement,
it does not.
Other comments, questions?
One other comment. In the 3 documents, I have to agree with Kevin. I wouldn't want to agree on anything but continue working on the agreement until we can come to terms that are acceptable by Bristol and by the village.
I agree, and I'd like to see another public session and see members from Bristol on board there as well as the public, because it wasn't very well attended back in September, and that's my concern as a board member voting on this. There wasn't, there had to be a quorum, if I'm correct, right? There didn't have to be a quorum for the town of Bristol.
The statute does not specifically require a quorum. It requires that a public meeting be held. And this is one of the statutes. Obviously, there's only been a handful of these cooperative agreements that have ever been entered into, so there isn't much guidance given there. There's nowhere in the statute does it say a meeting must be held, and at that meeting there must be a quorum of both boards. But that being said, obviously, it's better to have more public input than less.
Are meetings set up in the near future, might be given Bristol?
Well, yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think that, I agree with completely with Kevin's analysis of this. I think that we do want to come to an agreement with Bristol. We've lived with the 1997 agreement for 10 years, and it's served its purpose. And the nature of development, nature of what's going on in the area changed over 10 years. And I think that for us to be able to, between 2 communities, address the changes in state statutes that have occurred over time, and be able to incorporate those so that the people who live in the town of Bristol, in that area that is close to Pleasant Prairie, we have responsibilities to provide Bristol with the sewer to service those people, as well as stormwater management is important to the village.